Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today we got another solo album review, the newest project from JID The Forever Story. I'm personally not normally one to assess a mainstream breakthrough for an artist, but if JID isn't on the cusp of a big one, I'm not sure how you could quantify it, because make no mistake, he's been active for the past several years and has made a solid name for himself, but among hip-hop audiences. I might not have been as won over by DiCaprio too as a lot of folks were, but the potential and the talent was always there, and Off D's with J. Cole, it's a banger that's been on my workout playlist for years now. It felt more like there was something that should be there that was missing for me. Maybe JID couldn't break away from his sonic parallels. Maybe the content didn't cut deeper. Maybe the songs just weren't there in the way they needed to be. But I was keen to keep an eye on those next steps that were coming. Because make no mistake, Dreamville and Interscope were pulling out all the stops to ensure JID became a household name. And as a rapper first and foremost, I might think Enemy with Imagine Dragons is just a terrible song, but is the pop move that got him through the door, and I found myself impressed by not just the singles run coming up for the Forever Story, but the string of guest appearances he was racking up this year. At the very least, JID was on a hot streak, and the fact that he was doing it without relying on that big J. Cole guest verse cosign was really encouraging. That being said, it's been nearly 4 years since DiCaprio 2, and I didn't want to overhype this for myself, especially since the critical acclaim started flowing hot and fast. It looked like this was a launch where the machine behind him was working, and in a year where I have really struggled to find mainstream rap music that I've liked, I was excited for this album. So did JID deliver? You know, it's so damn nice when an album that's hyped up to be legit great actually meets the expectations, and it also seems like critics and fans are on board for a lot of similar reasons. But you know what, just meeting expectations, that's one thing. Oftentimes, if you get exactly what you want, your excitement can feel a bit muted. And yet, like with Denzel Curry this year, this album feels like a culmination and advancement of all that potential I had seen realized, and then some. It's clear that JID took the extra time not just to focus and refine his work, but also deliver a more layered and cerebral project that many will realize, and that also kicks a ton of ass with so many terrific songs. In other words, this might not just be one of the best albums of 2022, and certainly one of the best rap albums of this year, but also maybe the best project from Dreamville ever thus far, including every J. Cole album? Now, that is something I do not say lightly, and may come across as heresy to any of the coal miners out there, especially given my contentious relationship with his music for nearly a decade now. It's well documented on this channel. But it's important to highlight where JID excels in his own right, and where I feel like some of the Kendrick Lamar comparisons can be finally shelved. Yeah, they might have similar voices, and on Stars, JID does a similar pitch-shifting trick that Kendrick already did on Pride, but there's this understated playfulness to his wordplay that JID now commands that Kendrick has kind of grown away from, no matter what demented ad-lib Baby Keem gives him. Hell, on Dance Now, JID hops on an accent that wouldn't sound out of place from Eminem's Relapse, and yet nobody is complaining this time around, because JID balances it out throughout the song and makes it work. Also because Dance Now is amazing. But the bigger advancement to me comes with the song structure, the hooks, and a sense of focus in the melody. JID can rap his ass off on songs like Raydar, but he now has a better command of that melody and hooks. And while they tend to be sold with less commanding bombast, we'll come back to this, they have remarkable sticking power. And by the time we get to Kody Blu 31, he's outright singing. He might not have a powerful voice, but it's effective for what it's trying to do, especially when it's well supported. And recruiting Kenny Mason for the choral vocals on Dance Now and a nasal Uzi imitation in Just on Time, the uncredited James Blake and Yuli on Sistanem, what a great surprise to hear James Blake here, Raven Lenae's gorgeous vocals on Lauder Too, and even the kids choir played somewhat ironically on Money. They're great little touches. It very could have easily been the corniest part and the corniest song on the album, but there's a nice overlooked subversion that's been thematically earned by that point, at least to me, it works. The only hook that actually I didn't love was from Ari Lennox on Can't Make You Change. I mean, she's a great singer, she sells it, but I'm not sure the track has the momentum or vibes to really work for me. She could have done a little bit more, maybe had a verse herself. And it helps though that the guest verses are solid as hell as well. I've already talked about 21 Savage and Baby Tate showing up on surround sound back on Billboard Breakdown months ago. 21's verse only gets better with time, and I wasn't really surprised that Lil Wayne just went off on Just on Time. But given the past year for Lil Durk, I was really struck by how much he really committed to his verse on Bruddanem, especially given how much family thematically resonates across this album and how many folks that Durk's lost over the past couple of years. Then there's Yasiin Bey, aka Mos Def's verse on Stars. Initially I was a little bit thrown by how he compared the Taxman to ISIS and the Taliban, but then you realize his entire verse is taking the piss out of the delusions of grandeur of the super rich, because how much of their new slave problems are illusionary factors of their own circumstances that are then destroying the wider world around them. It's a really clever verse. Now what caught me off guard, and probably shouldn't have, was EarthGang on Can't Punk Me. I've been slow to get into their stuff, but the braggadocious verses they deliver here are layered and really a lot of fun, especially on the frankly front-loaded run of this album. It did leave me a little bit surprised that J. Cole doesn't have a verse here, but he does have a monologue that ends the album on the proper closing track 2007, which couldn't be attached initially thanks to sample clearance issues that I imagine will be dealt with in due time. I mean, I'm not wild about the monologue as him having the last word, but in context it makes sense. We'll come back to this. But before we get into all that, let's dig into the production. Where Dreamville projects have accumulated a bit of a reputation for sounding kind of dry or faded or maybe even a little dated in spots, taking on some of the personality of their label head, and where JID has skirted this on previous projects, there was that jagged, smoked out fuzz that created an off-kilter atmosphere on DiCaprio 2, and that could suit JID but felt inconsistent, occasionally messy. The Forever Story cleans that up considerably. You can tell this is the major label push given that all the stops were being pulled out, from getting Kate Renata to flesh out the burbling bass patter and sandy snares on Can't Punk Me, to the lush opulent strings and flutes alongside the dustier side of From Bad Bad Not Good on the muted Stars. But I would also argue long-running JID producer Christo is probably the biggest fixture to making some of these work, contributing to the bassy quakes of Raydar alongside numerous change-up, the swampy vocals and guitars on Dance Now, the deeper rattling bass and knock complete with the horns on Kody Blu 31, and the strings around Sistanem, that nasty sample reversal on Just in Time that sounds like the best production Lil Uzi Vert has never rapped on, and then the shambling 2000s-esque guitar back R&B of Better Days with Johnta Austin that was just terrifically executed. Now, circling back to my mention of less commanding bombast, that's also very true with a lot of these mixes. It's melodically more robust, but it's not in your face. And for an album that can feel long in spots, the fact that it's able to still sustain your attention while feeling relatively low-key with JID just piling up the bars is legit impressive. Now, a big part of this is the diversity of the sound and JID being such a great rapper, but I'd also argue it goes further. There's a sense of intimacy to just how well balanced and mixed so many of these records are that while they feel kinda heavy in the low end, peppered with vocal samples and coursing grooves, JID is drawing you into a world with more swagger than bangers, the latter of which he still has, but they take longer to lay down roots in your mind. So let's get to lyrics and themes, where JID has emphasized that this album required him to dig deeper, not just into his past, but the ongoing journey in the present he's facing as a rapper who's on the come up and breaking through. And this could have so very easily become cliched. How many times have we heard the hyper-lyrical rapper take his first steps into mainstream success, and we can rattle off the label concessions for crossover or the more money, more problems. But JID sidesteps a lot of this, asks the audience to both pay attention and dig deeper. One element that becomes notable right away is the presence of family, both biological and chosen across the album, and a constant factor to JID's Forever Story. Crack Sandwich, early and excellent example of this, not just for the string of sportscaster references in the first verse, but also telling the story of a street fight in New Orleans where someone put hands on his sister and he and the majority of his siblings wound up arrested for it, which prompts both pride and shame from their parents. And what's interesting is then juxtaposing that with Sistanem, where JID talks about his relationship with his sister deteriorating during his come-up, where she's worried that the money and fame is going to change him, but if anything, it just creates some distance, especially when his grandmother passes away. He lashes out thinking that his character was being challenged as he's buried himself in his work, for whatever reason. And then there's a nasty moment at the end of the song where he demands all the money he sent through Cash App to her, and she hangs up on him. It's a moment that really highlights the messy reality of being in the position to support your family with newfound success, but it can create some ugly, complicated scenes, which JID knows in highlighting the devil's deal he took back on Dance Now to find this brand of black opulence, because more often than not, the only person he's really helping might just be himself. And on some level, he knows it's not enough. His obsession with success isn't going to bring back lost loved ones on Kody Blu 31, or how none of it provides deeper satisfaction with women on Can't Make You Change, which is such an exercise in frustrated miscommunication. Honestly, kind of becomes tough to get through. I'm still not really a big fan of it. But thus, the back half of the album becomes an exercise in asking what the hell he's even doing it for, especially as an artist. Stars has him question his idols, and Yasiin shows him the egomaniacal reality of that other side once you find success. And as much as he's got the time to claim dominance in the modern rap game, even as an older MC, by the time we get to money, he can see kind of the grift of it all. Not just in selling that what the lifestyle can do to him and his family, but also his audience. Especially when so many rappers and drug dealers spend so much to wind up back in that same cycle of poverty. I like that he's very clued in to the visible hierarchies being reinforced, often with white dollars, built with changing goalposts designed to drive people into individual paths, not socialize. And if he can agitate the white guilt and explain the black burden while being able to give back with his success, well, even then it's not quite enough. It's not going to save his friends from prison, or worse, especially as by the time we get to Lauder Too, the sequel to the song from the Never Story, he feels a lot of the audience is hearing but not listening to what he's saying. And when the messages can be complicated or contradictory, I get why. And this is why I'm a little bit torn on 2007 as the closer, even if I think it's a great song and a natural album closer. On the one hand, it reestablishes his history and storytelling, referring to the elements of his family and his come-up, where he describes losing his football scholarship, dropping out and pursuing rap, and having to convince his father that it could work. I mean, I come from a sports background. I spent the past decade trying to chase this endeavor, and it can be complicated and tough communicating that to family who might not grasp the passion even if they respect your ambition for it as a job. That one really resonated with me, I gotta say. And yet J. Cole's attempted summation, bringing it all back to signing to Dreamville, highlighting JID's ambition for what will define him forever. I mean, given how J. Cole has shied away from some larger societal themes in the past couple of years, it seems a bit off to me to have him encapsulate the Forever Story, especially as JID sidesteps so much traditional rap capitalism ambition structures, or at the very least shows their consequences and larger, more complicated impact. I mean, maybe J. Cole does see the bigger vision. Maybe some of this is my own antipathy towards Cole in recent years. Either way, it does leave the door open for more, and I think that's enough. JID proved with this that his scope and vision, it's bigger, unique to him, and has enough nuance and complexity to expand past traditional hip-hop power structures while still easily satisfying everyone who is comfortable within them. But you know what? It's more than that. It's not just wildly entertaining and can sustain its scope and runtime, which is saying a lot, but also reflects a lived-in maturity, a guy in his 30s, a reflected flair, and an eye for clever detail that finally reflects all that potential he showcased the past year. It's a breakthrough in every sense of the word. And again, one of the best rap albums of 2022, at least to me. I can't praise it highly enough. It seems like a lot of folks, both in and outside the mainstream, are on board with this for good reason for once, and you should be too. Please check this out. It's worth it. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be extremely grateful. Got to admit, I was really looking forward to this. The fact that it actually lived up and then bypassed my expectations was such a thrill. Really happy to talk about it here. If you guys have comments about it, please leave them down there below. I'd like to see this get a little bit more exposure, as much as we can. The album's fantastic. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in supporting the channel beyond my merch, or hell, just want to get albums on my schedule or argue with me on my Discord, link to my Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times, but options available. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.